Well, what I do, since this will be your time, I'm gonna, as we come in live, I'm gonna introduce you, and as I do for everything you're doing as Democrat candidate for Congressional District 3, once I introduce you, this is your time, so you're welcome to begin to talk about anything you want to get it started, to tell them a little bit about yourself, and then from there we can roll with some conversation. As from there, I can probably ask you some questions.
Welcome. That's great.
Excellent. And if you do hear an echo, that'll go away once we're live.
Okay. Thank you for that comment.
You got it. All righty, just about 30 seconds. And then we got it till a quarter of, so 10 minutes, 10 strong minutes.
Sounds good.
And you're listening to AM Ocala Live, WOCA, the source, 8:35, 25 minutes before the top of the 9 o'clock hours. We just finished up with Galen there, Lifestyle Community Blood Centers. And now as we're moving forward here on the phone, we have Mr. Tom Well, Democratic candidate for Congressional District number 3, as we have him on the phone. Good morning, sir. How are you doing today?
Oh, quite well.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about yourself and to the extent as maybe to why you're running and what you think you can bring to the table.
Well, first let me clarify that quite well. I'm sitting in my bubble with my wife, and I have sufficient privilege that I can sit in here and earn my living on my computer, and I have great grief for the many people who can't, who are having to go back into work in an environment which is suspect, highly suspect. But back to the original plan of telling about myself rather than our common situation. I do have a PhD in theoretical physics, and I have grandchildren. So the state of the planet with respect to climate change is much on my mind. But to solve that problem, I think the words of Martin Luther King are quite eloquent and appropriate, that this is the time where we must all learn to live together as brothers, or we will all die together as fools. We seem to be headed down that path.
Gotcha.
The problems we have are quite significant, but most of them originate in our Congress. Our Congress has been passing laws which favor the few at the cost of the many. There is a class warfare going on in this country. We are losing. By we, I mean the vast number of people who work for a living daily as it is possible. And the prospects of my grandchildren are not looking very good. Since we have only one planet, my grandchildren are all the people of the world. We're all brothers, and we have to learn that it's time and past that we do so. And the pandemic that we're suffering from really clarifies some of the problems that we have failed to take care of each other in this country. It's not our fault. It's the fault of the system, which has been corrupted 45 years ago by decisions of the Supreme Court, which declared inexplicably that money is political speech. Well, there's a background for how that decision came to pass, but the consequences of that decision are that what used to be illegal bribery in your Congress, and that occurs in the whole world and all the time, is now legal bribery. You can give money, big corporations can give a lot of money, you and I not so much. And our congressmen then are dependent upon those corporate donors for their reelection, and they give little attention to our needs and wants.
Gotcha.
So,
Now,
go
with
ahead.
all that being said, as you come into wanting to put yourself in this role, what are some of the what are some of the priorities that you see if you were to take this position that you would want to work on, and then in what direction would you want to try to serve the community, and which way would you want to serve the community?
Well, I thank you for the question. The most fundamental thing is exactly what I spoke of. You have to find some way to circumvent the corporate funding of elections. And yes, you could amend the Constitution and try and do that, but that takes years. We don't have decades in which injustice should continue. And the singular solution that is available to us without interference from the Supreme Court is public funding of elections. It exists already at a very low level for presidential campaigns. It's so insignificant that it's not even a joke. But if you use the same structure, the same mechanism, and put a lot of money in there and keep that money and the candidates who receive it separate from the corporate candidates, then you really make a fundamental change. And that, I think, is best done by giving each registered voter a $200 voucher. That's our public money that goes into an account, and it can be donated to any candidate who declares in a legally binding fashion that he will take nothing else, either in his campaign or in his term in office. And that $200, that amounts to enough money in every congressional district to overwhelm the media, to saturate the media, and you will easily be able to get your message out with that amount of money. And your message is much more powerful than the corporate candidates that we can't get rid of, but we can defeat them. And the trick is, other people have proposed the same thing, notably Kirsten Gillibrand, and they see the consequences of public funding, that we would now start passing laws where we looked seriously and said, hey, private prisons for profit? You're going to make a profit off of incarcerating your fellow human beings? No, that should never have been and should never be. So we would then begin to correct the bad laws of the past. But how do you get people who've been elected with corporate money to vote to change to a new system of public funding? Because we can't replace the whole Congress. But we can make it where they can redeem themselves and get reelected by combining that public funding bill, very simple one-page bill, with public funding of our health care. I'm on Medicare, been there for 4 years. It's far better than the insurance I enjoyed at Georgia Tech, which is primo public insurance. And it's much, much cheaper because the consequences of that corporate funded Congress is they have passed many laws changing patents on drugs, changing reporting mechanisms for nonprofit hospitals. The cost of Medicare for all, for everyone, from birth to death, so of course there are no pre-existing conditions, with coverage for mental health, for eyesight, for hearing, for dental work, is vastly cheaper than what we're paying collectively for an inadequate healthcare system. And the pandemic has really, really clarified that. With 30 million Americans losing their jobs, about half of them, and this is regrettable, only about half of them had health insurance, but those people lost their health insurance. and they're in considerable statistical danger of getting the disease and suffering from it. What insurance company that's running for profit would sell you insurance to cover that? So the government realizes that and is making arrangements that your testing for COVID will be covered and free. There's already a law to that effect. But more importantly, that if you get sick and you have a $30,000 bill for treatment for COVID and you don't have a job, that they will, our federal government will attempt to cover you. But the greatest part of this disaster is that our federal government, Donald Trump, is trying to treat this as a state problem. Now, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, Franklin Delano Roosevelt did not say, "Hey, Hawaii, what you going to do about that?" We are one nation. And the technical importance of that treatment as a federal problem is that if you leave it to the states will go broke. And the states constitutionally cannot run a deficit, so they will have to start cutting programs like pensions for teachers, pensions for firemen and policemen.
We're just about out of time. As we just want to say thank you for your time as we are coming up here, as we're coming 15 minutes before the hour. For the folks listening, partner, thank you very much. This has been Tom Well, Democratic candidate for Congressional District.
Please visit me
thank you for your time, partner. Sorry we had to run out there, but
TomWellsForCongress.com.
Have a great day.
Thank you for the time. Take care.
Got it. Back after this, WOCA.
Hello, I'm Mark Sears with Rage Printing.
Thanks, partner. Sorry about that.